That's me. That was me, Troy.
Okay, got it?
Yep.
So if you have a computer that's in the meeting, turn off the speakers and the microphones.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call the regular meeting of the Lake Stevens City Council to order. We'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Kelly, can we go ahead and do the roll call?
Councilmember Dodgy.
Present.
Councilmember Peter Shaken.
Present.
Councilmember Frederick.
Present.
Councilmember Dickinson. Present. Councilmember Georgestad. Here. Councilmember Ewing. I just got a message. He's 10 to 15 minutes away. So Councilmember Tajik.
Here. All right. Next on the agenda, we have the approval of the agenda. Any discussion amongst the board or amongst the council?
Move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
Being properly moved and seconded, any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion approved. Number 5 on the city council meeting agenda is guest business. Is Sophina here? All right. Turn the floor over to Sophia Nunez from the Lake Stevens Food Bank.
I'm Sophina from the Lake Stevens Food Bank, and I'm here today to give a little bit of an update on the building. I'm so excited about what we've done so far with this community and this project. I'm here today with Gary O'Reilly, who is a part of the building committee, who's been a part of this project for many years. I'm also here with Steve Corsi from the Volunteers of America and Kirk Pearson from Volunteers of America. As you know, we have been working really hard to collaborate with the Volunteers of America, the food bank, the city, a lot of other community resources, committees, groups, Rotary, Seroptimus. Everybody has been working together to work towards this building. We finished our site plan construction. Everybody's probably seen the work that's going on with the foundation. And we've had to make a few changes, just like you do with construction. We had to accommodate for more room for pallet racking to allow for more food storage, moving the volunteers services upstairs, which made us add an elevator. Expenses have increased, inflation, all the fun things with construction right now. There are several things with this project I've learned a lot about. The requirements for a commercial building, like fencing, elevators, ADA compliance, landscaping, irrigation, and prevailing wage add up to major expenses that we've had to adjust for. The hard part about this project is we were a food bank asking to build more than just a food bank building. The original commitment for the $500,000 from the city was amazing. I was shaking with excitement for the unanimous vote, but little did I understand that we would need to keep fighting for so much more to get this completed. I have talked to some of the council members about my feelings on this project. I know there are times when I'm overwhelmed, but I am committed to this 100%. I'm new to nonprofit and working with the city and the county. I may not understand how it all works, but I do know organization, drive, and hard work to make sure I complete anything I've committed to. Our food bank team and I have committed to our hometown that this food bank and community resource center will be completed. We know there are a lot of important projects needed for this fast-growing community, but this project does need to be finished. I've attached a copy of the updated construction plan for all of you to see. Teaching kitchen changes, new construction schedule, our current funding plan, and our next launch for the gifting campaign from the community to get us across the finish line. I've also asked the Volunteers of America to be here today to speak about their commitment in partnering with the food bank and building to provide the social services to this community. Some of the council members have asked why we're not getting more donations from the community, and I wanted to address that. For this second phase, you will see that we have raised approximately $707,951 in cash donations. This includes recent donations from Larson's Financial for $5,000, Alexander Reed for $5,000, Seroptimus Group for $3,000, Bickford Four for $2,500, $1,500 from Taylor's Plumbing, and recently a personal donation from a community member for $1,000. Everybody is working hard towards this building to get us across the finish line. We're partnering with the Lake Stevens Rotary. They are going to provide the teaching kitchen so that we can serve, teach, take the food that we are bringing into the food bank and showing people how to make good, nutritious meals for the community. We have recently done an updated feasibility study showing that the community continues to support this project. I have faith in God and in this community that we will complete this project and we will get that funding for $400,000. I also ask for additional support from the city and the amount of $450,000 to get us across the finish line. With this additional support, I believe you can see on the construction timeline that I've sent you that we will have this building done by the end of next April. On the timeline, it shows February, but we all know how construction goes. So I'm going to give it to the end of April. Thank you for your time and your partnership.
Well, that's Sabina. If you could hold on. Are there any questions that council has of Sabina?
Before you, I did send everybody a copy of the building budget breakdown. That's up on the screen now. It does show you what we've raised. And if you scroll down, Kelly, you can see some of the expenses. Most recently, the elevator, that was an additional expense that we've added. So if you have questions about that, I'm always happy to answer that. People can email us, call me, talk to me, talk to Gary, talk to Steve about what we're going to do for this community. Yes.
Sabina, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but can you share what you think might happen if you weren't able to get the $450,000 from the city at this time?
Yeah, I would not finish the social services portion of the building. We would have a food bank portion. We would work really hard to get occupancy, but we desperately need social services. We need a home for the Volunteers of America. They're a temporary facility, like I think a one-room office. I was recently at an event in Everett and they're overran. I mean, their community resources are completely tapped because we have people from this side of the trestle going to Everett to get help with rent checks, with, PUD, all of the things that the Volunteers of America does. And Tina has one room to work out of here in Holy Cross Church. So we would not have that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I just have a comment. Thank you so much for your efforts and for the outstanding presentation. I reviewed the presentation that you sent out and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And the 23rd, I understand that you're going vertical on the 23rd. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This month.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We just finished I think we just got approved and poured the the pit for the elevator. And now we can frame.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have citizen comments. Just a reminder, if people could fill out their green sheets. I have one that is not related to the short-term rental. Kelly, is there anyone online that wishes to make citizens comments not related to the short-term rental ordinance being considered tonight?
I don't see any hands up. So just again, reminder for anybody online, if you would like to speak to the council, please raise your hand in Zoom. However, we do have one phone call. Troy, is there?
Yeah, I'm trying to see what that is. There's a code to do that. I'm just trying to
Okay.
this here. Star 9.
Star 9. So the phone number that ends in 1140, if you do want to speak to the council, hit star 9 and I'll see your hand go up. I see no hands.
Okay.
Councilmember.
Darlene Salo, you could please come to the lectern and you have 3 minutes. And I've asked Cliff Chellen if she could be our timekeeper.
Let me just give you permission, just 1 second.
Hi, good evening. I'm Darlene Salo with North Cascades Crew. We're a rowing club out of Davies Beach. We're mid-progress with the city on the dock replacement project over there. However, I wanted to bring our process to the city council and let you know where we're at with that progress. So I'm going to read a brief statement. We'd like to thank Sarah Garceau for taking time this afternoon to speak with our city representative, Ann Simnowitz, regarding modifications to the new Davies Beach dock so that our club can return to our boathouse in the upcoming months. North Cascades spent 10 years planning and fundraising to build our Joe Rance boathouse at Davies Beach and now find ourselves displaced with an unusable dock. We've invested heavily over the years in our boathouse, our boats, and our equipment, and the city has a contractual obligation to North Cascade and to the boathouse. We have been advised that options are being considered. However, no firm commitment or time frame for a modification or alternative options have been given. We are asking for the council's support once again in upholding the provisions in our contract for a workable dock. Our organization serves approximately 100 Lake Stevens youth and adult and we're a 501(c)(3) nonprofit, and we're in jeopardy of collapse if forced to operate from a parking lot until next spring. We've retained a contract land use attorney to assist us in this process. I just want to say before closing that fall is our busy season. The lake becomes quiet and our programs pick up, and we can't operate out of a parking lot and stay viable. So I'm hoping that we aren't over there for 2 months, and I'm hoping for your support.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wished to make public comment not related to the short-term rental? All right, seeing none, move on to council business. We start with Councilmember Tadgett. I have nothing to report tonight. Okay, Councilmember Dorset.
Thank you. August 26th and 27th was the Board of Health District Retreat. And we spent some time together talking about the work that the Health District does. I think over the last several years, it's been very COVID focused. It was great to have Health Board staff talk about the other work that they've been doing and the work they're going to be ramping up now that they can focus on some of their other tasks. Learned quite a bit about their tuberculosis program, their sexually transmitted disease surveillance, food, just their food oversight and childcare oversight. And it was wonderful to kind of hear the scope of all that the Health District does and how they benefit our communities. The Health District continues to work with the county to become a county department. The timeline is January 1st. There's a lot of work being done to talk through how that will happen in such a short time. And so we continue to be involved in that work as the board. That's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Dickinson.
Yes, first of all, I want to say I'm going to read this. So I just want to be sure to say all that I need to say today. I attended the Citizen Advisory Committee meeting last Thursday and I saw potentials there, but there is work ahead. I appreciated meeting with the new member, Beth Lott. I attended the Senior Center Board meeting yesterday and they spoke about upcoming events and trips they will be making, including the upcoming Harvest Festival downtown. The snow aisle helped with computer usage as well as the opioid training scheduled for October 15th. Continue to be appreciated and much needed. A silent auction and holiday bazaar are also always a big draw for this time of year. Anything to raise money for the food bank is a good thing. Food bank, sorry, I got the food bank in my mind, but anything to help the senior center. Part-time office assistant and a part-time maintenance worker are needed at the senior center. Until those positions are filled, the senior center will have to rely on volunteers. So this could be like an advertisement if anybody's looking for help. The budget. The senior center needs our support in a more dependable way. Although it is almost October, they still await ask for funds from the city. As long as I've been on this council, there's been a struggle to get the funding needed to serve the seniors in this community. Therefore, I ask please to consider the final budget contains a 30,000 yearly funding to the senior center to help them serve our community. If you've ever been to the Snohomish Senior Center, serving a town about 1/3 the size of Lake Stevens, you would know that we can do so much better in serving our seniors. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Frederick.
Thank you. Just a quick update to keep the board informed. I keep saying board, sorry. I just walked out of another really long meeting. To keep the council informed. Several weeks ago, we adopted a resolution giving the mayor authorization to sign on to the opioid settlement agreement. And just to give you a heads up, that agreement really focused on the importance of regionalization based on the calculations for the distribution of funds. I just want to share that there is a regional meeting set up between an initial regional meeting set up between Snohomish, Skagit, San Juan, Whatcom, and Island counties. That'll be happening here in a few weeks. The county is going to be sending one of their prosecuting attorneys there to attend that meeting, along with a representative from the health district, which will be the common configuration of that meeting. Is generally the legal counsel and the public health representative from each of those counties that will be participating. Additionally, I attended the WASAC meeting with the Attorney General. They talked about the same topic and the importance of making sure that everyone's signed on. And it sounds like that is progressing well across the state. So as that work continues, I'll make sure that I continue to bring that back to this group.
Thank you. Councilmember Peter Shagan.
Yeah, just quickly with the ongoing discussion with the sewer district, our August 24th meeting was canceled due to lack of a quorum, and we are now scheduled for September 22nd. So just want to alert that to you folks. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Daughtry.
I spent a greater portion of last week in transportation-oriented type discussions with PSRC's Transportation Policy Board, talking about how to distribute the funds from the federal government for transportation projects that come through PSRC, which is most of the funds that come to the state or for our part of the state. Also attended a couple of meetings for community transit, one of those being the policy board for the community transit, Everett Transit possibility of a merger. It's really not a merger, it'd be basically community transit taking over Everett Transit. So those are the kinds of things I was involved in for, like you said, long hours on meetings. I'm getting really tired of Zoom. I just don't want to do Zoom anymore.
I mentally blocked out PSRC.
Yeah. That's true.
That was there.
Actually, I do want to do Zoom with PSRC. I don't want to go to Seattle. That's all I got.
All right, thank you. Just want to note that the Youth Advisory Council assisted with the community clothing drive. They provided about half of the hours that were donated for that event that assisted 50 families. There were thousands and thousands of dollars of clothing and cash donations from our community. I will just tell you that there are a number of Ukrainian immigrants that are in our community. In Lake Stevens, one family has 3 separate households living with her family, and she has another one that will be arriving shortly. So the gratitude that they expressed to those in the community was significant. And when you see mothers in tears and adults in tears, gratitude, that's a sign of what community Lake Stevens has to offer for the generous people that also make cash donations or and for the time that was donated to make that happen. Let's move on. No mayor's business, as Mayor Gailey is absent. The department reports.
Yeah, we roll into introduction of new employees.
Well, let's see if this is on. Is it?
It's on.
It's working. Okay. Great. My name is Aaron Halverson. I am the city's Public Works Director, and I'm here tonight to introduce Tyler Button. Tyler is a new member of the Public Works team. He is one of our facility maintenance techs. We have 2 of them, so he maintains the room you're in, along with this facility and several others. Mr. Button was born and raised in Lake Stevens and attended school here through 2010. He moved away for a few years to build a career in a fence building company for 8 years and moved back to Lake Stevens 3 years ago. He has a wife, 5 years, and a 3-year-old daughter. She's not here, but maybe sometime we'll have her come by Public Works. That'd be great. Some hobbies include working on cars, gardening, video games, going on cruises on his motorcycle, and spending time with family as much as possible. He's been happy to given this opportunity. He works really early in the morning. So right now he's probably contemplating dinner and bed. Already hit. Good. Okay. Well, please welcome Mr. Tyler Button.
Welcome.
I'm Pearl Manis, your building official. We are very excited in the building division to tell you we are at full staff finally for the first time since I've been here in a year. So super excited. So I'd like to introduce you to Cody. He's our permit lead. He has worked in building and land use construction for many years on the customer side. So he's going to give us an insight of what our customers are looking for and what they need. So he's being our voice of the customer and learning city regulations and rules, which is very exciting. He's a graduate of University of Washington and a degree in business management. He enjoys golfing and mountain sports. He's an avid dirt bike rider, and he just got his scuba license certification. This is Cody. Rounding out our team is Cameron. He is our code enforcement officer. He has come here from the Seattle Police Department. He loves the commute, 12 minutes. He loves the community. His wife and son, his son is starting preschool tomorrow, so he's very excited about that. He has a background in law enforcement, immigration, customer service. He's originally from Montana. Him and his family enjoy the outdoors and reading and writing. He's written a couple books. This is Cameron.
In your packet this evening, there's 2 staff reports, one from Max regarding the HWA accreditation. And Sarah has also put a update on the trail easement progress for your review. In the interest of time, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But other than that, that's your presentation.
I think,
Any
Gene,
questions?
I think Max did want to speak to
Okay.
the accreditation.
You
Yes.
first.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't think I can access my slides here,
Oh, okay.
or I don't know how to put it that way.
Okay, let me,
Yeah, your channel.
Max, go ahead and start and I'll work on it.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Max Roth. I'm the city's risk manager, and I oversee the Public Works accreditation process. I was asked to give a brief update on what is going on with the accreditation. And I want to go briefly over the goals of the accreditation, what the process looks like, what the timeline is, and ultimately what we have accomplished so far. So main goals of the accreditation are to evaluate the internal processes of the department and kind of compare them with the state-of-the-art practices. And by doing this, we will be able to evaluate or detect any gaps and then fill those gaps by developing appropriate policies and procedures. Ultimately, the goal is that this process will increase productivity. It will also increase safety, and it will generally provide better services for the citizens of Lake Stevens. So, thank you.
Yes.
And we move on, right? Yep. Thank you. So what does the process look like? In February, we started with a general setup phase that took for about 2 months. And then we moved on and started work on the self-assessment phase. The self-assessment is basically the core element of the accreditation. This is where we evaluate the processes of the department and compare them and find gaps and fill those gaps. At the end of the self-assessment, there'll be a peer review by the APWA, and that will be followed by an improvement phase where we can basically improve our answers and tweak them a little bit. And ultimately, this process will then be ended by an evaluation by the APWA, who will then award the accreditation. Since this entire process is a process of continuous improvement, we will be required to submit a midterm report 2 years after accreditation was awarded, and then we'll have to reapply for accreditation in 4 years. So what have we accomplished so far? What have we done so far? During the setup phase, we mainly focused on establishing a policy management system for the city. This is an essential to manage all the new policy documents that we will be creating during this accreditation process. We did that by implementing a new software solution that will eventually house all city policy and procedure documents. And it will not only serve as a library, but it will also define responsibilities, and it will ensure that regular policy updates and reviews are conducted. We then, Kelly, could we move on to the next slide? Thank you.
Yep.
We then moved on to the self-assessment phase. We identified 370 so-called practices that we have to complete. And we complete these practices by providing a specific statement and supplementary information in form of practice, in form of procedures or policies. Currently, at this point, we have completed 38 practices and 85 we have brought to a level of substantial compliance, which we expect to finalize in the next weeks. Thank you. So besides those practices, what else did we do? In this process, we also created new policy and procedure documents. So far, 11 new policies such as media contact policy, stormwater service level policy, or even a policy on policy development. We created 19 new standard operating procedures that touch topics from illicit discharge to fence maintenance or excavation safety. And we also created 22 other guideline documents. I'd like to finish by saying that this isn't only a public works effort. This is an effort that the entire city is undertaking. Our teams consist of 30 people from all city departments, and they're all providing input to this process. Next steps will be focused still on the self-assessment phase for a while longer to complete this. We'll do a halftime check-in with the APWA to get feedback on some challenging practices. And in case the sewer district is to join the city, we will incorporate them into our efforts. That's my update so far. Maybe the Public Works Director, Aaron Halverson, wants to add some additional information if he has any, or.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Max.
Awesome, thank you.
I recently attended the National APWA conference, and there was a session on accreditation. I'll report that I think we're getting in on the ground floor of the accreditation program. APWA is trying to grow the program. They're interested in finding solutions that shepherd agencies through the process. So I left that conference really optimistic that I think we're going to grow into this accreditation and we're going to set an example for other agencies in the region to get their accreditation. That's all I have to add. Thanks, Max.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Council.
Sorry, is there any more questions? I'm more than happy to answer them.
Good.
Questions?
Councilmember Frederick.
Max, or possibly Aaron, or both. Question for me. Thanks for the update. I think accreditation is really important. I've been through several in my industry as well, and recognize that accreditations are often not so much about creating something new as it's documenting the best practices that you have and identifying where the data sets are and how do you actually allow that body of work speak for your capabilities. Are there, not to put anyone on a spot in front of anyone else, because certainly wasn't a question I intended, but thought about in the moment, are there resources that you need to, are there resources that you don't have that you need to be able to make sure that you're successful in this endeavor? Because recognizing, I didn't recognize until I saw the timeline that this is a very long accreditation process. Most accreditation processes are anywhere from 3 to 6 months, maybe 9 months with a review. I mean, this is multiple years.
That's a fair question, Councilmember Frederick. I met with Anya, Director Warrington today, and discussed staffing needs in Public Works to accomplish this project. And I think we're going to come back through the mayor to discuss that with the council. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you.
Sarah?
All right, I have an update for the power line easement. There's a few pages in your packet for the agenda tonight. 2 of those are maps just to give you a visual on where the easements are versus the properties through the Willowwood Division, number 2, as well as Quail Court. Also part of this easement is through Frontier Manor. I provided an overview on timeline, which dates back starting in February 2020, where staff started reaching out to the neighborhood and discussing this possibility, all the way through December 2021 with the intent to acquire easements, and then an update for today as to where we are with the process. At this time, we have signed 8 of 25 out of the Willowwood Division. 17 remain unsigned, which will be going to the courts for a default judgment. And then Quail Court has 11 out of 32 of the easements signed. 21 of those remain. Of those, 8 of them have not been personally served. Mainly people live out of the area. So they'll have to be published, service by publication, it's called, in the paper in order to complete that process. So things are moving along. With the ones that are serviced by publication, they estimate that completion by October. So there is the update in a nutshell.
All right, thank you. Move on to consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Consent agenda passes. We will now move to item 11 for our public hearing. Is there anyone else who has not filled out a green sheet that would like to make comment related to the short-term rental? Okay, if you could hand that to Clerk Chellen, please. Kelly, would you raise your hand, please?
Yes, green sheets are in the back here.
So we'll now open the public hearing and we'll have David Levitan, if you could provide the staff report.
All right, thank you, Council. David Levitan, Planning Manager. So we are here tonight for the public hearing to consider amendments to the city's tourist home regulations, which is kind of an antiquated term, now more commonly known as short-term rentals. So that's land use application 2022-0046.
So I'm just going to give a little bit of a background on the process, and then I'm happy to answer any questions before we move on to the public comment portion of the hearing. So just a little bit about the code amendment objectives that we started out with several months ago. Some of the objectives were to modernize the code, provide a more streamlined process, and also balance property rights with neighborhood concerns. So a little bit about the existing code for tourist homes was adopted back in 1998, has been unchanged since then, so almost 25 years. The industry has changed dramatically. The proliferation and the popularity of short-term rentals has definitely increased during that time. A little bit about the existing rules. They require owner occupancy, also known as a hosted environment. So basically the owner needs to occupy the property. Current regulations are limited to 10 consecutive days and 30 total days in one calendar year. It requires an administrative conditional use permit, which is a type 2 land use permit in the residential zones that are outlined in the zoning code. And then I think because of a lot of these restrictions, the city only has one currently licensed in the whole city. So a little bit of an overview on the process. Planning Commission held their first work session back in December of 2021. They held an additional 2 work sessions. There was one in February 2022. And then they, during this time, we were also doing outreach to the community. So we started to receive public comments in advance of those work sessions. We heard from about 10 members of the community. Staff incorporated comments from the Planning Commission's first 2 work sessions, as well as some of the public comments, and provided a first draft of code amendments to 1444-064 and associated chapters. That was on March 16th. The Planning Commission was generally comfortable with that language and directed staff to bring the amendment back for a public hearing, which was held on April 20th of 2022. The commission heard from 5 members of the public at that meeting. There had also been a couple of written comments submitted in advance of that meeting, and ultimately they voted 5-1 to recommend council approve the STR, the short-term rental amendment that was included and reviewed as part of that April 20th public hearing before the Planning Commission. So following that April 20th public hearing, staff held a work session with the City Council on May 3rd to review the Planning Commission's recommendation. The council had several comments on the draft code amendments, asked for staff to research several additional topics, and then also asked for additional outreach to current operators of short-term rentals in Lake Stevens. So staff did that, sent out a letter to all of the property owners that we could find from Airbnb and VRBO as far as kind of matching up properties and finding the property owners for those, sent those out. Had an additional work session with the City Council on June 7th, where we presented, there was an opportunity for the public to provide public testimony at that meeting. We submitted kind of a complete package of public comments that we had received as of early June was included as an attachment at that June 7th work session. And then also provided kind of a matrix of staff responses to some of the questions that council had asked at that initial May 3rd work session. At the conclusion of that work session on June 7th, council opted to form a 3-person subcommittee to consider some additional refinements to the code amendment related to short-term rentals. And so that subcommittee worked over the last few months to draft a new draft of the code amendment, which is included within attachment 1, which is Ordinance 1139, sections 2 through 6 of attachment 1 specifically. So some of the highlights of that revised code include maintaining the type 1 review process that had been proposed by the Planning Commission, establishing a maximum of 2 short-term rental permits per individual, couple, or group, an allowance for both hosted and unhosted rentals. So either owner occupied renting out rooms in the home or the rental of the entire property. identification and registration of a responsible party, basically somebody that would be responsible for responding to concerns, to potential code violations. Establishing a maximum occupancy of 8 individuals. So that could be in one party, that could be in multiple parties. Tying parking requirements to the number of bedrooms that are rented. So if it's 1 or 2 bedrooms, a certain number, 3 or 4, basically kind of tying it to the projected parking demand. And then a required posting of good neighbor guidelines that goes through some of the city requirements and ways to mitigate potential adverse impacts related to short-term rentals. So as I mentioned, the June 7th meeting packet had included all comments that the city had received through early June. Attachment 3 of tonight's packet includes comments that were received between June 7th and September 9th. There have been a number of additional comments that have been provided either directly to City Council or forwarded on by staff since September 9th, including up to today. And members of the public have an opportunity to provide oral testimony as part of tonight's public hearing. So with that, staff has evaluated the code amendment that has been drafted by the subcommittee and has determined that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, in compliance with the Growth Management Act, and serves to enhance the public health, safety, and welfare. Those are basically the findings that need to be made under Lake Stevens Municipal Code, section 14.16C.075. The proposal is categorically exempt from SEPA and was sent to Commerce for the required review. All required public noticing has been completed, and so staff is recommending to council that they take public testimony and then consider approval of the amendments shown in Ordinance 1139. I'm happy to answer any questions and would also offer the opportunity to subcommittee members to kind of talk about the amendment as well. All right, questions of staff. Okay, Gary?
Yes, David, you mentioned you sent out questionnaire to the operators of the VRBOs in the city, of which there's only 1 licensed. I believe there's about 22 based on the information that you found. How many responses did you get from those folks?
So we got, I believe, 3 emails, and then there were a couple that also provided oral testimony at that June 7th meeting. So I would say we sent out about 25 letters. We got about 6 that were returned to sender. So about 20 we assume were successfully delivered, and we got feedback from probably about 4 or 5 total. There was a little bit of overlap between the written comments and the oral testimony.
And I guess the question I would have of those folks that responded, did they not realize that they're supposed to be licensed?
I think that there were some that maybe didn't realize that there were existing regulations on the books. And so we have not focused so much on the enforcement at this point. We were wanting to draft the code language. But I think there were generally people maybe that were not familiar with the existing tourist home regulations.
So I guess that leads to my question. I mean, you mentioned that the existing tourist homes has been in place for a number of years, yet we've had relatively no compliance. And so moving forward, I guess, how do you suspect that we will enforce the new rules since we didn't enforce the previous rules?
Yeah, I think that that's something that obviously we, as a city can choose to make a priority. I think that enforcement of the code, there is more language within the proposed code amendment that addresses code enforcement. We have a separate, code enforcement section of the code. We are largely complaint driven within the city of Lake Stevens. We have 1 code enforcement officer. So we would anticipate taking some direction from council and working with the council and with other departments and the police department to try to make enforcement more logistically feasible.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
David, as you mentioned, we're essentially complaint driven. And code enforcement has been a recent focus area in our staffing and conversations here in recent years. Do we have any data to suggest that there's an increased complaint figure related to the short-term rentals?
Yeah, so a lot of the evidence is anecdotal. We did reach out to the police department, and it is kind of difficult to search just based on specific complaints that are related to short-term rentals. Their information is generally tied by address. So unless we had a specific address that we knew had a short-term rental complaint, it's hard for the police department to kind of pull that data. So I can't really speak to the enforcement or to the frequency of police responses to short-term rentals.
But we do have the address of where the short-term rentals are because we sent letters to them.
We do, yeah. So we could pull that data and kind of cross-reference that data if there is some interest. That was something that was done back in June just for the generation of those letters, but I do not believe that we kind of cross-reference those specific addresses.
I'd actually offer it was a specific request of the city council when this was initially presented, that we specifically requested to see what data there was related to the number of complaints received. And we actually went down the path of talking about how do we know these places exist? Because their addresses are listed in VRBO. And so, I mean, we have a way of identifying what these addresses are. We have a process to identify where our complaints happen. So it is just a matter of cross-referencing those two things, and then we know where our complaints are happening.
Yes, and that's something that we can do. And just to clarify, the address aren't listed on VRBO. We basically had to kind of go through aerial images and kind of compare the listings to what we knew and our familiarity with properties, especially along the lake. Any other questions?
Yes, I just want to say, as far as Chief Pizzizo is concerned in our police department, thank you, David, for mentioning that. My concern is that the police department is not being overwhelmed in any way. They need to help our community, of course, but I'm wondering about what on their shoulders, what they're responsible for. Are we giving them the tools they need to keep this city safe in this regard? So that's not really a question. I recognize that.
All right, thank you, Mary. Any other questions of staff? All right, we will move on to open public comment. I'll just take the comments in the order that I have them in my stack here.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't have a question for staff, but I did want to take an opportunity as one of the subcommittee members just to say a few words before we get started.
Please.
First of all, I want to acknowledge the hours and hours of work that have gone into this process from the planning committee and the city staff. And citizens who are willing to come and comment and share their experiences and their concerns. It's a lot of work, and coming to an ordinance of this type takes commitment from a lot of people. So I want to acknowledge the planning committee, the planning commission, and the city staff in their work in this. I think that, you know, we had kind of a tricky task, and in the work of when there are competing interests, coming up with something that meets everybody's expectations and needs is impossible. And so we took very seriously the feedback that we received from our community. We took very seriously the feedback we received from owners of short-term rentals and looked at other communities. And our work was really to find a balance, to balance the desires of current homeowners and their ability to enjoy their home and their property, and also current homeowners to be able to allow short-term rentals to occur on their property. The ability for families to be able to have a place in Lake Stevens for their other family to stay when they're here from out of town, and really wanted to make sure that we were providing an option of short-term rentals while putting some guidelines in place that were safe and that helped preserve our community. So I guess I appreciated working with Council President Ewing and Councilman Frederick. I think that we did our very best to find that balance, and appreciate the opportunity to hear from you and to move forward on this process. So thank you.
And Council President Ewan, if I could say just one thing that I forgot to include in the presentation before we move on to the public comment, mostly because a lot of the public comments I think are going to be focused on a desire for an owner occupancy requirement. So there was, and the city attorney can get into more specific on this, there was some case law that came out of the 5th District Court of Appeals about 3 weeks ago. So that's basically covers federal courts down in Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana that determined that an owner occupancy requirement proposed by the city of New Orleans was unconstitutional under the Commerce Clause of the US Constitution. So that's not something that's legally binding to our district at this point, but that's something where there is some potential case law related to requiring owner occupancy for short-term rentals. So that's something that we included within the staff report for consideration by the council. And I'd welcome any additional comments from the city attorney.
Yeah, just to comment on that is that the facts of that case were very narrow. That is, the city of New Orleans required that in order to get a short-term rental license, the owner of the property had to live on the premises. And that's the provision that the court found to violate the Commerce Clause, because it, in their determination, unreasonably discriminated against out-of-state residents being able to have property in the city and to rent it out. It's important to note that they distinguished in that case their facts from a case out of Santa Monica, California, that was decided by the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals. That's here in a case called Rosenblatt versus City of Santa Monica, where the court held that an STR regulation that required someone to live on the premises full-time, not necessarily the owner, but someone, so that could be a representative or whatever, to be on the premises in order to get the short-term rental license. So that's fair game. The 5th Circuit Court of Appeals decision, you know, as was indicated, it's not in our circuit. Whether or not the 9th Circuit would rule the same, I mean, I really don't know. It's one of those things that the case is so new, I don't know. We'll just have to see whether that spurs challenges across the United States to this type of requirement or not. So I don't think you can say at this time that that's an absolute no, but it certainly is a red flag and a caution that it could cause problems down the road. So, but I thought it was important to alert you to that decision because it is brand new and rather timely with what you're doing here.
Thank you. All right, David, any further comments before we get comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to open the public comment. We'll start with Cliff Call. If you could, 3 minutes, if you could come to the lectern.
I'm Cliff Call, live at 625 Stitch Road, Lake Stevens. I spoke earlier regarding VRBOs, have some experience ringing them myself. Have no problem with them. I did support the idea of a hosted on property, understand what the attorney just said as I read the actual case law myself. But I feel like your propose or your purpose of minimizing potential impacts to residential areas and preserving housing stock and allowing property owners to efficiently use their property, which I'm reading is, okay, owners of property that want to rent their property as a VRBO. You've taken care of them, but I don't see anything in this that has improved the
protections for the residents. And what is the biggest problem we have with VRBOs? It's noise. It's obnoxious people living next door, which drops your house. If I'm going to come buy a house and I know there's a VRBO next door, I'm not going to pay top dollar for that. So you're taking away value for a house. And there's no real restrictions. How about things such as, if we're making amendments, let's suggest a few. For property owner protections. How about minimum age for renters, 25, not 18, 25 years old? How about a prohibition on loud music? How about no loud music? I mentioned this earlier. I stood up and said they do this in Palm Springs. No music can go outside the property limits. It's a citation immediately and expulsion from the property and a $500 fine. Why don't we have that? Because that would eliminate a lot of the concerns that we have. It's not like, you know, we want somebody to be able to rent the property. What we don't want is that unruly crowd. And how about, why are we opening this up to 2 for each person? How about one rental per person? Why is it open to businesses? One owner can rent his house. And that's it. One permit for the city. And how about enforcement? I didn't read it. I kind of went through the so-called city codes on it. It's about as vague as it can possibly get. How about we do a 3 strikes rule? How about we do fines? For one code infringement, $500 fine. Second one or more, $1,000. This is, by the way, not new. This is not rocket science. This is what's been happening in other countries or other cities. And a 3rd strike and they lose their permit and do not regain it for.
Sir, we're at 3 minutes. You could wrap it up. Thank you.
Eileen Spradlin.
Hello, my name is Eileen Spradlin. I live at 10429 East Davies Loop Road. This is our city's first attempt at regulating unhosted vacation rentals, and this issue is critically important to the people who live, work, and raise their families here. Our Planning Commission spent months thoroughly researching this matter. They carefully considered the impact of transient occupancy properties on residential neighborhoods, and they drafted a thoughtful, short-term rental regulation requiring these properties to be owner-occupied. City Council was provided written materials outlining best practices for regulating short-term rentals. They were given examples of neighboring communities' revised short-term rental regulations. These revised codes were essentially a guidebook, what they tried, how it failed, this is what they did to fix it. Some of these governing bodies opted to limit short-term rental operations, but all significantly increased regulating them. It appears the council subcommittee members made the arbitrary decision to dismiss and ignore all of this advice and guidance in favor of business and corporate interests. This code reads like an invitation for persons, couples, business interests, and corporate entities from anywhere and everywhere to purchase, own, and operate not 1, but 2 full-time rental businesses in our city neighborhoods. The code language surrounding host requirements, guest behavior, violations, penalties, and enforcement is vague, generalized, and discretionary. It is insufficient for protection of surrounding properties. It is very concerning the city has authorized a single code enforcement officer to manage this regulation when they've been unable to maintain full-time staffing of this position. Fines and penalties must be significant, must be enforced every time a violation occurs. I have 65 signatures from Lake Stevens residents in support of the Planning Commission's owner occupancy requirement. These are neighbors and represent only a handful of residents who feel strongly about maintaining the integrity and character of their neighborhoods. Council needs to reconsider compromise and develop a short-term rental code that serves the majority of their residents. To Mayor Gailey, your residents don't want mini hotels in their neighborhoods. Please do not endorse this ordinance. Thank you.
Nikki Odegaard.
This will just be short and sweet because I'm saying actually a lot of what Eileen has just said. I was really disappointed to see when the new thing came out on Friday because as she said, it's so vague. My big thing is the enforcement aspect of it. There's no use having rules if they're not enforced. And right now, nothing's being enforced, obviously. We've only got one person who's even got a license. And you know of 20 something, just from that. I was encouraged to see from the paperwork that VRBOs and Airbnbs have both made their regulations better. And they will kick people out if they get enough complaints on them. And I think that's excellent. But there are many ways that people can get themselves an Airbnb or VRBO or an STR itself. You know, they don't have to go through Airbnb or VRBO. So I think we just, people will just go around it. And it's a quality of life thing. I mean, you know, Lake Stevens we have residential places, homeowners have homes. And if you end up with something that is essentially being given the ability to just become a commercial, it might as well be a motel, you know. I mean, there really isn't that much difference between it. So and without even the manpower of a motel with someone there to kind of try and keep tabs on things. So I really feel like I absolutely am in favor of short-term rentals. I think they're a great thing for families, a great thing to be able to make a little bit of money. And I have nothing wrong with that, but I think the owner being present at the time or someone who is accountable, and then if the rules are not kept, the owner should be accountable, and B, the people should be kicked out, but the owner should be accountable, and the fines should mean something that makes it worth them not getting fined. So it makes it worth them following the rules. I guess that's really what it comes to, is enforcement. So I'm not against them at all, but I am against them not being properly supervised. And it seems like that last thing that came out was worse than the one before. I was here on June 7th, and this seemed to give way more leeway. It was way vaguer. There was nothing very cut and dried. It gave every little out that you could imagine. So that was my worry about it.
Thank you.
So.
Brad Nicesetter.
My name is Brad Nicesetter. I live at 525 East Davies Loop Road. In general, I am opposed to short-term rentals, but I also assume that there are well-ran hosted rentals within city limits. So the main thing I'm really opposed to is unhosted short-term rentals. However, I'm not going to really focus on my specific reasons why, but I did read through the ordinance, and I would like to make a couple of comments. You have them in your packet, or you will, and I referenced the section number and all that stuff, but I'm not going to get into those exact references here. But I feel that evaluating an application only is not sufficient enough. I think that a permit and license should require a site visit. The owner should bear all the responsibilities of the facility, the structure, the STR, not allow an operator to do so, which is all over the ordinance.
owner/operator. My preference is owner only. I think additional language needs to be included to clarify exactly what the two short-term rentals per entity is. Is that are they allowed in the same structure? What do we do with duplexes? Can a duplex have 2 STRs? Can a single-family residence that has an ADU be 2 short-term rentals? In that case, you conceivably could have 16 people in a structure that has 2 living areas and has 2 short-term rentals in it. Should they be allowed to be contiguous properties? If there's if a person owns 2 houses next to each other, again, those are both short-term rentals. That's 16 people in a very close proximity. There is a statement about if the responsible party needs to be changed, it's within 14 days. Within 14 days means before and after. In my mind, I think that should be before, because there's a conceivable possibility that there's no responsible party because they've changed, but they have 14 days before or after. Parking, I'm concerned about parking. I think the sizes should be clarified and not be compact size. There's language in here that allows boat trailers and RVs. Boat trailers are one thing, RVs another. I mean, if you're going to allow RVs, are people going to be able to stay, live, cook, and sleep in the RV? Then you're going to have in excess on the property the allowed 8 per structure. And finally, the bedroom with dens, lofts, and hide-a-beds, it's not really a good way to.
Sure, we're at 3
parking
minutes.
spots.
Thank you.
John Spencer. John Spencer.
Thank you. I'm at 9925 North Davies Road. I'm here basically to ask you not to adopt the ordinance that's before you tonight. I'm asking you to return it to the staff and ask them to upgrade this ordinance significantly so you can address the kinds of issues you've already heard this evening. I do have very serious concerns regarding the effect of unhosted STRs on the supply of single-family housing in our community, the cost and the availability of single-family houses, and the fact that short-term rentals take the rental market, take houses out of the rental market. And it's clear that it really disrupts the market on housing, and it will in our community. I think there are improvements needed, specifically already stated. Owner's agent needs to be accountable, needs to be available within a specific time. You need to improve your good neighbor policies. They're not written anywhere. They're not there. I'm not going to repeat all of this. It's in the letter that I sent you. What I would say is that we worked very, very hard over the last 4 years. We and you subsequently have worked very hard to make Lake Stevens a place where people can live, work, and play as a community. And it is without a doubt a fantastic place for people to live. And we have a great school systems and parks now that complement that. Allowing unhosted STRs in our community and to begin to disrupt the neighborhoods takes directly away from what we have attempted to build in this community as a fantastic community to live, work, and play. I would not suggest that you abandon upgrading the current code. And I would like you to look, and I'm not sure you have looked at this, but I think you should look very seriously at what Kirkland has done. They have come up with a way that works around the issues that legal counsel has brought up. They work to deal with the family that wants to rent their home as a STR. And if they can't be there, they have a way of dealing with that. So with that, I'd suggest to you again, don't adopt and don't take action on this particular ordinance here this evening. I think you need to take the time to improve upon it and certainly give more consideration to the issue of hosted versus unhosted. Thank you.
Janice Huxford.
Good evening. My name is Janice Huxford. I am at 625 South Lake Stevens Road. I also have properties elsewhere around the community, all of which could be affected if you were to adopt this ordinance this evening that I ask passionately that you do not. I serve on your planning commission, and we spent hours and hours, as noted by many tonight, on this. We heard from our citizens in this community, and they were so educated on the issues, not only through their personal experiences, but where they travel to and where they have rented places from and what is working and what is not. You have said it tonight yourselves. Councilmember Frederick said that you need to follow best practices. When we were talking about public works, you always follow best practices. And then there was something else that was said, that you had sent out notices to the people that you know, that you have found out are doing this Airbnb or VRBO, and that you had many return to sender. So what does that mean? That means you have nobody that's answering the door. When something happens at 2 a.m. next door to me, and I need to get a hold of somebody, it's not going to be convenient for me to call our city compliance officer, where we have one in place. And I'm glad that we do at this moment in time. It's inconvenient for me to call our police officers. This is not what I want them doing. It's going to fall on me as a neighbor, as a citizen of this community, as a investor in this community, to take care of business myself, which means that I'm going to be up at 2 a.m. trying to get somebody's car out of my driveway, or party shut down, or music turned off, or whatever happens to be going on in the community. So please, please do not adopt this ordinance tonight. Go back to what your planning commission worked so diligently on, worked so hard on, took public comment on. We did not do this in a vacuum. We did this for the best possible good of the community. Please look at what we did. Go back to that. Let's start from there and readjust your thinking. I appreciate your time.
Kyle Havens.
Hey, everybody, Kyle Havens, 9421 15th Street Northeast. I'm asking that we do not pass the ordinance as it's currently written. My family and I live in a small Lake Stevens neighborhood with deeded rights to a community beach that is shared with about 20 of our neighbors. This is one of the older communities on the lake, and because of this, we do not have an HOA. Our beach is a small private area where neighbors and kids gather daily, enjoy each other's company, and work together to maintain our small lakeside oasis. I am opposed to unhosted short-term rentals in Lake Stevens, but at a minimum, I would strongly recommend that the council make an amendment to the short-term code that states short-term renters are not to be granted access to shared community neighborhood spaces unless the HOA or the shared owners of the property agree to grant access to these short-term renters. The average person on our streets comes down to visit the beach maybe 3 to 7 times a month. Excuse me. If an investor purchases a home on our street and starts to advertise our small community beach as the selling point or main attraction of their short-term rental property, we would have a constant revolving door of renters at our beach. It's important for my neighbors and our family to know who is sharing the beach with our family and children. It's our community policy that we don't allow friends or acquaintances to play at the beach unless they're accompanied by the homeowner. That's a rule that's not written in our HOA because we don't have one. It's a guideline that community members have agreed on together. A short-term rental in our neighborhood would completely change the dynamics of our shared community beach and significantly increase the traffic to it. Community members leave their kayaks, paddleboards, toys at the beach. Neighbors know what belongs to who, and they respect each other's boundaries. Having short-term renters down there would potentially change that. It opens us up to liability. People having their equipment used, their paddleboard used. Without addressing these impacts on these small neighborhood community spaces, like I said, it's going to change the fabric of our small neighborhood community. Please strongly consider adding a clause to the short-term code that prohibits investors from overrunning our shared community spaces. This city's done a great job over the years of improving our parks, waterfront for everybody to enjoy. Short-term renters can and should be able to access all of those local amenities, but we need to prevent investors or people trying to turn a profit from turning our small shared community spaces into a main attraction for short-term rentals. In finish, I just want to say it is so important that we have good neighbors. And if you polled all Lake Stevens residents and asked them whether they would have a long-term committed member of their community living next door or short-term renters, a revolving door of people, think about what they would say. How many people want to live next door to a VRBO? Thank you.
Kirsten Hagan, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kirsten Hagan and I live at 9917 North Davies Road. I have been here before to talk to you about my concerns on short-term rentals, and I also urge you not to adopt the code that has been proposed for you today. There have been multiple pages of signatures submitted supporting requirement of posted sites, which indicates the concern that people have. And you've heard the concerns, and so far they are uniform in terms of this proposed set of regulations does not meet our concerns. The city attorney pointed out a case, the Hilo versus Stark versus City of New Orleans. And with all due respect to the city attorney, I would like to reemphasize this case isn't binding on anybody. It comes out of the state of Louisiana, which is the only state in the United States that is based on Napoleonic law and not English common law. Louisiana decisions have almost no bearing on what is happening in the rest of the United States. And I understand that this went into the federal commerce clause, but it was based on Louisiana statutes. It's not binding, and the case is also not persuasive. When I went to read the case, I noticed that the factual background of the case is that the city of New Orleans put in a short-term rental that didn't have very many restrictions on it. And when they did that, they set a 1-year review. They were going to have their planning commission come back in 1 year and take a look at what had happened and whether or not their code was sufficient. And this is what they found. They found that the rapid proliferation of short-term rentals had brought nuisances to the city. Specifically, they discovered that short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods had lower residents' quality of life. Many visitors in the city who stayed in the short-term rentals were loud and did not clean up after themselves. The study also determined that the expansion of the short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods had led to a loss of neighborhood character and made housing less affordable for residents. That finding is not unique to New Orleans. It is the finding in every single jurisdiction that I reviewed, and I reviewed probably close to 100 different jurisdictions that is grappling with this issue. This is a serious issue to people that live in Lake Stevens. The code proposed today is completely short-term rental based. There are 2 rental permits per person or entity that can have this. All you have to do is put your 2 short-term rentals into an LLC and you can get 2 more because you just call your LLC something else. And then you can get 2 more after that and 2 more after that. It is absolutely not enforceable. The registration of the responsible party.
We are at 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, so we'll close the public comment portion of the hearing.
Councilmember Ewing, if I could just make a comment about the comments that we did get on email.
Yes, please.
And then also ask for Zoom comments. I don't think we're gonna have any. So the following individuals that I will list here have sent email comments, and you all should have copies of these. And if you don't, please let me know, but we've been trying to forward all of them on as they've come in. Kevin Koshi, Bradley Naysother, Kathy Naysother, Aileen Spradlin. Aileen also commented and says a comment about the hard copy signature sheets that she dropped at City Hall. Nikki Odegaard, Don Iverson, Robert Blair, Lisa Saxons, Kyle Havens, John Spencer, Dave Nelson, Katie Silos, and Leanne Bell Barona. So those are all comments that you should have in your email.
Thank you. And thank you for reminding me about the Zoom participants. Are there any Zoom participants that wish to share public comment on the short-term rental code amendment?
So I don't see any hands up right now, but I do have 3 phone calls or phone numbers and 4 others in our attendees. So if you'd like to speak to council, please raise your hand in Zoom. And if you're on a phone call, that's *9 to let me know that you do want to speak. So I do have one. Let me bring Ryan in. Ryan, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. We have 3 minutes.
I thank you first for allowing us here on Zoom to participate as well. I'm Ryan Valinga, 1407 Springbrook Road. And I just concur with pretty much everything everyone said. I think after looking at this more in depth, I'm concerned that there's not more protections. I agree that VRBOs are a wonderful thing that my family and our travels have used a lot and really appreciate. And I think people should be able to come to our area and appreciate and be able to use the same amenity. But I think there needs to be just more protections for our neighborhoods to make sure that it's done the right way so that it can be a good thing for our community. So I just request that we don't accept it as currently proposed and we take it back and make it better. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. Just confirm. There are no other hands up.
Okay. So since we've heard from those in person and those on Zoom, we'll now close the public comment portion. And any further comments by staff?
I don't have any comments.
Okay, Greg, any additional comments?
No.
Okay. Very good. All right, further questions by council of staff?
Do we have any folks that have spoken in favor of this or any testimony that we've had presented that's in favor of the ordinance?
Well, not tonight, and I do not believe in this latest round of comments that we've had any that were in favor. There are some previous comments from a couple of property owners that operate short-term rentals that were in favor and had some proposed language, but that was back in May and early June, I believe.
Well, I'll start since nobody else is jumping in here, but we've obviously heard from our constituents.
So hold on, do you have any further questions?
No, I do not have any
Okay.
questions.
Any other questions from council members for staff before we move on to discussion?
I'm going to keep asking the question and making it a public record till I actually get a response. I would love to see some actual data to validate this issue. I've asked it for months and I don't know why I'm not receiving it. I'm saying that very clearly as a public record because this is a significant question and it warrants clear data to support the decision that the council has to make.
I will second that. I have personally asked Chief Azizos and Mayor Gailey for this data repeatedly, and I have not been given that information. So why I have not been given that information, I don't know, but I'm not in a position to obtain that information myself.
I will go further to say with said data, it indicates there is a need for stronger controls. I would be supportive of that. But the truth is, to date, I can't say how many complaints. I can't talk about decibel levels. I can't talk about property damage. I can't espouse to these impacts. And it's frustrating to create an ordinance. When we talk about taxes, we can do the calculations and talk about how it impacts us, how it impacts our citizens over time in very real terms. And this is very different. And that's not to exclude any of the comments that we've had this evening. It certainly isn't. This is not a task that's being taken lightly in any way, but it requires data, hard data. And I welcome the opportunity to get to that.
Any further discussion from council?
I'll just mention, just because a home is on Airbnb or VRBO doesn't mean it's a short-term rental. A lot of them rent them out for 30+ days. So that wouldn't include a short-term rental on that. That would be considered a long-term rental. So I'll just say maybe not all 22 people got back because maybe they're not doing short-term rentals. I can't speak intelligently about it, but just because it's being listed on VRBO, there's a lot of people who do 1 month rentals or 2 month rentals or certain time periods or traveling nurses, and they put them on VRBO and Airbnb to advertise, and people come in and make monthly offers on those properties. So we can't say that all 22 people, which isn't a large number of people here in Lake Stevens. I would really love to get to the bottom of that number as well, but it doesn't mean that all 22 of those people are operating short-term rentals. And I also would love to hear the data on, last time we talked to Chief, he didn't know of too many incidences that were out there. Is that correct, Chief?
Without the addresses, I don't know what properties we're talking about. So I have to have the addresses to look in our database. There's no way to respond to a house with knowing as whether it's a rental or a property owner that owns the house. We don't mark those in our cases.
And that would be the case for us to make sure that everyone has, a registered home in the database, so that way we could start to collect data and come to a better conclusion. But without data or something in place that helps us do that and a little bit more enforcement, I know it's an issue for people on the lake, and I acknowledge that. But at the same time, we have a whole community of people. There's CC&Rs in almost every association that doesn't allow short-term rentals. Almost every home that's been built in the last 10, 15 years probably has a no short-term rental clause in the CC&Rs, which is extremely enforceable as a community to say that home can't be a CC&R, that home can't be rented out. Short-term maybe has a provision to do long-term. Can't speak intelligently about what everyone's CC&Rs, but that is going to take up the bulk of these new neighborhoods. All have caps on rentals, and most of them have a no short-term rental clause in them. So that's enforceable from an association standpoint for a community to come together and say, if they want to have short-term rentals, they would have to get a super majority to change that. Almost can never happen. So there's a lot of communities that won't be affected by this because they have clauses in the CC&Rs, and almost every new community has CC&Rs that are out there. So that would prevent a lot of the short-term rentals from spreading as though you might think it could be anywhere. It would be associations that some people have mentioned that have no HOA or someone who lives on a piece of property. So when you start to weigh all those things out, the number I don't think is going to be as explosive. And once again, we're in an age where there's a lot of people who say, I enjoy Airbnbs or travel and use Airbnbs that don't have a significant amount of problems. And I think VRBO and Airbnb has done a significantly better job of addressing these issues. For the most part, there's no one night rentals, and they are watching how many people are coming in and out. And people who are doing Airbnb and VRBOs are all putting doorbell cameras in to see how many people are coming, going, and watching their property significantly better. So hopefully those type of things will help the community as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion from council?
Gary said he would start, but he only asked one question.
All right, I'm done with the questions. So be glad to start.
All right, well, we're in discussion and deliberation. So you're welcome to make your comments.
Thank you. Just to comment on Councilmember Tadgen's comments, I think we have two different issues here. We have like front property owners and we have residential neighborhoods that are your traditional subdivisions. Granted, those typically do have CCNRs. There's not probably a lake property that has a CCNR. So that is the concern of the folks that are sitting in this audience. There is no control. And so we have two separate issues. And to lump this in to one issue is very, very difficult. The issue of the subcommittee, I find troubling. No transparency. I'd like to know how you came about coming to your conclusion of these items here that are very watered down from what was proposed by the Planning Commission. It just seems, who do we represent? The residents or people that are potentially going to rent these things? It seems like we're approaching it from a different standpoint. And so I just kind of scratched my head over that one. This issue of the hosted versus unhosted, the immediacy is the issue. If there is a problem, the immediacy is to get to the owner or the contact. The way this is written, you could have somebody living in Oregon. Could be living in New York. That's the agent. What do they care about if they got a problem in Lake Stevens? They might get back to you. Probably not. The good neighbor guidelines. I have no idea what that is. I have my own set. And everybody in this room probably has their own set. It's not defined anywhere in here. If it is, please show me. We've talked about a lodging tax previously, which I believe most of the council was in favor of in setting a precedent. So when we do get a hotel, we have a lodging tax in place and we're not reacting. We also talked about notice to the neighborhood. That is not in here at all. It'd be nice to know if you have upcoming a VRBO in your neighborhood. We've all talked about it, and I thought that was a good idea, but for some reason it was eliminated. As far as the permit issue, I think Mr. Niceather said it the best. There needs to be more to it than just applying for a permit. Is this going to be a one-time inspection? Is it going to be an annual inspection when they reapply? Are these places ADA compliant? They're now public spaces. Do they comply with fire code? We don't know. And yet we're going to give them a permit to operate. Other businesses within the city have to comply with the fire code and have to be compliant with that. They're inspected by the fire department and they pay a fee for that. We also talked about impacts to public services. None of that is addressed in here. The coming and going of people are using our parks, our roads, our services. We talked about it, but for some reason it's not in here. So I guess the question is, who do you represent? The residents or the potential occupants of VRBOs? And the way this is written, I think my perception is you're not representing your constituents or the residents of the lake. So.
Any other discussion or deliberation from council?
I just want to respond to, I think it's unfortunate that you didn't have the benefit that we did with the information that we were given by city staff in regards to a lot of your questions.
Well, it'd be nice to have that information.
Yeah.
Why don't we have it?
Yeah, I think.
Just like Councilmember Frederick talks about. Why don't we have it? Why are you privy to special information?
I don't think it's special information. I think it was information we needed to come to this place, but
What
it's
is
not-
the information though? How did you
So can I
justify
finish?
your decision?
Can I finish what I'm saying? please?
Certainly.
Thank you. So I do think it makes sense. I think you're asking several questions that we have basis for as to kind of how we came to this place. Happy to share the information that we do. I think that you asked 8 or 10 questions, and to provide that information here would potentially take another couple of hours, but I wonder if it makes sense to share that in a workshop or to have that conversation, to put that on our next meeting so that you also have the information that we had that allowed us to come to this place.
Certainly, I would appreciate it.
Great.
I think the residents would appreciate it also.
I'm going to jump in and respond a little bit too. I think it's interesting to talk about transparency. Certainly, transparency is important. And as I've said, I've asked transparently for the raw data on this issue for quite some time. With that being said, I'm also not going to simply be quiet when accused of not being transparent. We can certainly make every single document that we have looked at in this available. Some of the things that we looked at, we talked about, we had public comment tonight that talked about looking at adjacent cities. One of the cities that we looked at very closely was the city of Everett, which has an incredibly scaled down regulation even compared to ours. We also looked at cities in Whatcom County, in Whatcom County. And we did take into account everything that was presented to us. We asked questions about the taxes in the different ways they could be construed. Barb was kind enough to do analysis on those things, and she provided that to us. I actually thought they were provided to the entire council. So if not, we can certainly make sure that those were forwarded to the entire group. And we could certainly have another workshop and talk about this. That being said, I certainly am not in a position to fund any short-term rentals. I think everyone knows what I do for a living. I'm not in real estate. I'm not in property. I'm not in property management. I have no personal interest in this other than making a fair and balanced decision for all 40,000 residents of Lake Stevens. I take a bit of objection to the assertion that I had some other ulterior motive in my decisions. That means that we should get all the documents out there so that everyone could see them. I'd also like to see all of the data that we have. I'm going to say that again, because I'd like to see all of the data that we have on this topic, and I'd like it to be public, all of it.
Any other discussions or deliberation? I'll just note that I have repeatedly asked for information who contacted the city to take a 24-year-old ordinance. I have not had one single staff member or community member or planning commission member take responsibility for taking this item and making it the top priority for the city of Lake Stevens for 2022. That is something that I would like to know. That is something that someone from the planning commission, someone from city staff, or someone from the community can take ownership for. So I would like that to be included with the data.
Viewing, I'll step up to the table. This issue was brought to my attention by a couple of property owners at the south end of the lake that were being, they had a VRBO on one side and they were being threatened with a VRBO on the other side. And I brought it to the attention of Director Wright that we need to update our policies. As it's been stated, we're trying to get out in front of this stuff, not react to it. And if you look at every resort community in the United States virtually, they've all had problems with trying to implement things after the fact. VRBOs have gotten popular in the last 5 to 10 years. And so it's like, who cares if it's brought to the surface? It's an issue that our residents are dealing with. And so there's a level of concern. So why wouldn't we bring it forward? That's our job as city council people. to recognize what the concerns are out in the community and try to provide some solutions. That's a problem.
No, I'm grateful that you have taken that's the first time I've heard someone take a responsibility for that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't think you can just go and try to say that there's an issue for the people around the lake. We have to balance this out for the whole community. This isn't about just one group of people. We have to be consistent for our whole community. And you have a lot of people out there who would like to have their homes as VRBOs. As far as them using the amenities, we pay taxes equally to have these. You can't say, don't have anyone come and use our parks. That's not realistic. You can't say someone's paying taxes. If they're paying taxes, they have the right to go out and use the park or have a guest use the park. And I don't understand that whole thought process of why they can't use amenities and so forth in our community. They're going out and supporting our restaurants. They're out using, amenities out here. They're doing lots of things. They don't pack a cooler in and stay shut in the house all day. They're out using restaurants and so forth. As far as the uses, I think the courts have ruled that it's not a commercial use. It's dependent on the usage, which is residential. I don't know if you have any.
Well, of course, any short-term rental that's in a residential district is subject to our code provisions as to the permitted uses in that particular district. There are some provisions in different short-term rental ordinances throughout the state or the country that have additional restrictions on the use, making sure that it's tighter, that it's used solely for residential purposes, as were suggested made earlier about putting additional restrictions on. Some of those things get implemented, but right now the way it is, or the way it would be under this code, is that people using the short-term rental in a residential neighborhood cannot use it for commercial purposes. It's not a permitted use in those neighborhoods. I mean, because that is a problem that some cities have experienced, that people who will rent a house to use it for other things. And when those problems have become present, and then you'll see these types of restrictions in SDR regulations that attempt to limit the usage to strictly residential purposes, defining that in even greater detail that we define currently in our code. But as a general rule, right now, it would have to be used for a residential purpose consistent with the zoning.
So I got a question. One of the people brought up the fact, and I think that Marcus also did, is that there's some VRBOs, Airbnbs, et cetera, that are greater than 30 days. I happen to know of what is, they've rented to the traveling nurses, so it's about a 90-day type thing. So this is a short-term rental for anything under 30 days, is that correct? That's what the definition of short-term rental is according to this ordinance, if it had taken effect. And I believe it's the same definition that the planning commission came up with. Is that correct? 30 days is a short-term rental.
Right, and that definition is used because we have statutes and regulations that regulate the rental of properties on a month-to-month basis. Once you start, if we tried to impose the short-term rental restrictions on people who rent their property on a month-to-month basis, or 2 months or 3 months, then we're going to get ourselves into some problems with property owners' rights and their right to either live or rent their home under state statute. So nearly all of these regulations are solely regulating rentals less than a month. I mean, because if you want to rent your home for 6 months, you can do that. It's a property right. You want to rent it for 3 months, you can do that. That's a property right. So that's why it's under 30 days.
Well, in addition to that, I mean, it's also, I mean, that literally is the definition strictly out of statute, right?
Right, even our state statute of short-term rentals, you're correct.
I mean, owner and operator are both also codified in the same state statute. I want to pose a scenario that kind of gleams to the challenge with this ordinance. And it was brought up the noise, and I agree. The person with the cannon for Seahawks games, I love the enthusiasm. I love football. I can't stand the cannon. Just bugs me. If we have quiet time codified in our code already. It's already there. Some of the things we specifically didn't put in the code, we didn't put in the code because it already exists elsewhere in the code. But we do talk about quiet time from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I would agree, there should be a process. It is unfortunate that an issue like that would fall to law enforcement. My question is this: if we specifically put in this fine for someone $500, $1,000, whatever, because they have a complaint, they're violating the noise ordinance, why should their 105 decibel party be somehow penalized more than someone else's 105 decibel party? The impact, the physical impact to my hearing is the same.
No. I was just going to comment about noise regulation. Washington, maybe unlike some other states and like some others, but we have state statutes that regulate the regulation of noise. And the state statute regulates noise requires it be regulated by decibel level and decibel level readings. There's some allowance for general nuisance noise regulations, but a city has to submit their special noise regulations to the state for their approval before those can be adopted. My own opinion is that it would be problematic to impose noise regulations on short-term rentals that aren't imposed on any other house in the neighborhood. I think that could be probably easily challenged in this state and declared unconstitutional. But so I think that's a problematic area in the state of Washington to try to have special noise regulations for short-term rentals as opposed to any other house in the neighborhood.
I asked, not because I haven't, well, I did say I'm not crazy about the canon, but it speaks to the nuance here of what we're trying to parse out. And the goal here of creating something fair. I mean, obviously we don't have this as an action item tonight. It is not there on our agenda as an action item. But
actually it is because it's an ordinance that we're going to vote on.
You'll
one way or
approve,
the
deny,
other.
or continue.
There is no motion.
I would move that we table this, take it back to get some more information. We're looking for information.
Yeah.
I know Councilmember Frederick has said, hey, let's see what the data suggests, which I'm all for too. Let's find out what things are legal challenges and find out where we sit with this. I don't think it was closed process. The people were chose. I think you guys made the best decision with the information you were given, and it sounds like some tax information, other stuff was put together as quickly as you guys could get it. And then brought this as your guys' best faith effort to put it in front of us. If we need more clarity on the reasons why behind it, I'm all for taking this to a workshop so we can work through it all. And that way it's an open process. Anyone who wants to come and be part of the workshop and see what we're deliberating on and the challenges that come along with this, I would invite everyone to come to that. And so that way you guys can see how the process and the challenges that we have with this to balance out a whole community of people who some want property rights. It's not just, I get phone calls from people who say, hey, I don't see the reason why we're putting such a stifling thing on, VRBOs. And then there's other challenges. And why shouldn't I be able to do what I want with my property? I know that goes against the grain of what some people have frustrations about. I get that. But I believe that the three-person got together and said, hey, what challenges do we have? What can we can't put a decimal on because it's going to be challenged. And then we're going to fight in court about it. So maybe if we have a chance to have the group explain some of the challenges they had with it and look through it, then maybe it'll be a process that you guys can see the challenges that come up for a whole community versus just maybe a group of people around the lake.
Lord Patrick, did I hear you make a motion to table this?
No, we haven't closed the public hearing yet.
Okay, he
so
did say
we
he
can't take
moved
action.
to, okay.
I said, I think we should table this.
Okay.
So if there's no further discussion or deliberation, then we can close the hearing and we can take action. Any other information or any other discussion from council? Seeing none, hearing none, I'll close the public hearing and now ask the council for action. Our options are to approve the ordinance as written. We can reject it or we can continue. What is the pleasure of the council?
Move to continue.
Second.
Okay, so we've got a motion to continue and we have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Is this a motion to continue at a regular council meeting, or are we going to continue deliberation in a workshop? In other words, we're continuing it, it goes for a vote, up for a vote on the next regular meeting. So that's a continued public discourse. If we're remanding it back for reconsideration at a workshop, that's completely different than a continuation of a public hearing. Am I right about that?
Can you distinguish that for us?
Well, you've closed the public hearing right now.
So the hearing's closed, so the action let's take is versus continuing going to the next public hearing versus going back for.
Right,
additional
you could table, you could table consideration of this matter to a date certain or table following a workshop. Or somebody could move that we take no action now and simply set a time for further workshop and discussion on this particular item.
I think that was the intent of the motion.
Okay, so I don't remember who made the motion. Would you like to clarify?
Councilmember Frederick.
So
Councilmember Frederick, would you like to restate your motion?
When's our next workshop? Is it next week?
Yes.
That's why I was.
And the next meeting after that would be October 4th.
Or you can move the schedule for a workshop in
Well,
October.
I mean, I'm just one person, I want to see I don't know that the data is acquirable in the next 7 days. I'd leave that to staff, but I would move that this be remanded to the next appropriate workshop.
Do we need a specific date, council?
It might be helpful if you can give
It's
us a
October
time
4th?
range within the next.
I mean, I'd rather it be next week if we can get the requested information.
I don't think that's realistic. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like they've got to cross-reference homes and to get the data that they're looking for.
October 4th.
Okay, so Councilmember Fred, your motion is to continue this until October 4th, with the workshop on October 4th.
And Councilmember Dickinson had seconded that.
So you second that new motion. Okay, any discussion?
6 o'clock.
It'll be 6 PM.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor of the motion? Actually, we get a roll call vote, please.
Yeah. Councilmember Daughtry.
Aye.
Councilmember Peter Shagan.
Aye.
Councilmember Frederick.
Aye.
Councilmember Dickinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Jorstad.
Aye.
Councilmember Ewing.
Aye.
Councilmember Tajin.
Aye.
Passed.
Okay, so this matter is continued until the fourth workshop on October 4th, 2022. All right, so we'll move on to action items. Action item A, resolution 2022-14 fees. David.
Council President, could I make a suggestion?
Yes.
As the next action item also included information relevant to the short-term rentals. There's no reason that the next action item would have to be passed tonight, so we could table that till your next action item after the short-term rentals.
Okay.
I move that
concluded.
we table action item 12A, resolution 2022-14 until until our next regular council meeting, which would be October
11.
No, 11.
Second. So all in favor of tabling action item A till October 11th? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion passes. Thank you, Director Wright, for that recommendation. Troy, if we could go to the cooperative purchasing agreements with Washington Learning.
Yes.
Sourcey.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, council. What I have before you today is to authorize the mayor to enter into a cooperative purchasing agreement with, can you hear me? Washington Learning Source and Puget Sound Educational Service District. The background for this is that they have put together an RFP for vendors out there who have specialties in delivering video surveillance equipment and services, goods and services. And we are looking towards expanding our security program within the city. And with that, we have a very specific video system that meets our CJIS requirements, which is our criminal justice. And I spent a long time trying to find vendors that are certified, which require to have access to this engineering support to do so. And came across Security Sound Solutions Northwest, who was used by other partner agencies to do their security camera program. Now, this is just a cooperative purchasing agreement. It's a very simple thing for us to sign on to, which allows for us to use that RFP process to be able to purchase goods and service to accomplish our goals. So.
I just want just a point of clarification. The action you're asking us to take tonight is to hire a consultant.
This is just to authorize the mayor to sign a cooperative purchasing agreement so that we can purchase goods and services through the Washington State, through this cooperative purchasing agent. It's kind of like NASBO, these other state contracts that we use to buy goods and services. So when I'm looking to buy equipment for the city, I'm always looking to find where I can use these purchasing agreements to get the best cost of goods as well as professional services. So this is just another purchasing contract in which I can do that.
Thank you. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong stat before.
But there's no obligation to purchase anything.
No, there isn't.
It's
Not
just a matter of
yes.
This is just giving us the permission.
It's giving us the permission to buy off of this. Yes. So coming after this, we have some video surveillance projects that we're going to be expanding out to. And there's a vendor that uses this contract or has been awarded this contract so that I can use them to do these projects.
We're looking for a motion to move this forward. I would ask that we allow the mayor to enter in to the cooperative purchasing agreement with Washington Learning Source. Source.
That's a type of.
Second.
And the Puget Sound Educational Service District.
Second. Any discussion?
No. Makes sense.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. We'll now move to discussion items. City Minister Brazel.
Draft agenda for September 20th, 2022. Under city department updates, we have new police department officer introduction and sergeant promotion. The consent agenda, we have canceled September 27th, 2022 council meeting. Appoint park board member and veteran commission. For discussion items, we have storage facilities code amendment. Council retreat discussion.
What is a council retreat discussion? I thought we weren't going to do one.
For January or February.
Take it.
For January, February, not for
2023
twenty
council
twenty-two.
retreat.
Gotcha.
Got it.
We've got some dates and staff's been looking at facilities. So we'll have some items for you to choose from. And the draft agenda for the next week. Any additions or deletions?
I do have one comment and one addition. I do want to thank our clerks. I neglected to mention, Councilmember Dodger and I did interviews this past Friday. Some really outstanding candidates we had for our board and commissions. And I'm excited for the people that are going to be joining our workforce. They're great. And our clerks do an outstanding job of getting the people signed up and getting the chairs in place and setting up interviews. And so thank you for that. I do have an action item I'd like added for funding for the food bank from Sopina's presentation tonight. I'd like to add it to next week's.
Already approved that.
We approved the $500,000 that we had already stated. They're asking for an additional $450,000 tonight.
Right.
Yeah, they're asking for additional.
They're asking for additional funds as noted in the presentation. Like that to be added as an action item.
Would it make sense to put that on the workshop agenda first to have a fuller discussion in conjunction with our budget conversations? I don't know, just a thought.
Those conversations are going to extend out. I think there's an immediate need for those funds. You see that they're breaking ground. And the city's participation in that will encourage the county, the conversations that are happening with the county. And also will dovetail with the funding from private citizens that are committed to the additional $400,000 that they will be committing to that. I've had conversations today with those involved in that fundraising, and I've been assured that those funds are available. And so, as noted tonight, the immediate need for the social services, yes, the food bank is an important part. The social services component is just as important, if not more so. The Veterans Commission, the veterans need a place, Volunteers of America need a place. And that's also our emergency response, post, I don't know what the proper term is for it, command center. If in the event that there's a catastrophic event, my understanding is that's going to be the center there as well. So
time is of the essence.
yes.
Great.
So I don't see any need to delay.
Makes sense.
To delay that. So I think the immediate action or expedient action is appropriate.
Thank you.
And so the council is welcome to have that discussion. But I think the presentation tonight was thorough. It was,
I'm good with it being an action item.
That's fine. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I didn't realize the
I just,
order of operations. I appreciate that information.
so is that enough clarification?
Great.
She had made mention that she provided us with her presentation. Did anybody get that
I forwarded it to all of you today.
today?
Yes.
What's in the package today?
Thank you for doing that.
What time was that?
11:17 a.m. But
Today.
It's no problem, Gary. I'll send it to you again right now.
Sorry, but I don't have anything. Oh, I apologize. Thank you.
I don't have an issue with it being an action item today. I do have some questions about it being an incident command post in a catastrophic event.
Well, I may have misspoken there. At some point, I've seen that there as that, and that was one of the selling points for that. That may not be the current plan with that.
Certainly not anything that has to be a transfer. But if that's still the plan, I have an opinion I'd like to share at the appropriate venue.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, anything else for next week's agenda?
Council President, I believe Director Warrington intended to have the salary survey presentation next week.
If that is her intent, I
believe
don't see any
so.
reason why we couldn't have that.
Yes, compensation salary survey for next week.
Okay. And that's a discussion item.
There will be a presentation from Compensation Connections and a discussion.
Thank you. Any other things that any of our directors have that we may have omitted? I do, Chief, I apologize for asking this without giving you advance notice. The depreciation schedule and the leasing options that Sergeant Barnes has been working on, do we know where that is at?
It's with Barb for finance. We're getting our budget, so we're working together on that.
Okay.
Barb helped us. We're working on a budget because of our 2022 cars got canceled. So we had to reorder those through 2023. So we're working with Barb. She helped us get those things done, and we're trying to get the replacement cycle updated. So when we do the package, we have a couple other requests coming forward in the budget. So it's all put together as a package, and it's going to be hard.
Thank you.
It's in your face.
I had to clarify a little bit.
All right, very good. So hearing nothing else from our directors and nothing else from council, thank you for the clarifications we've had on the agenda for next week. And looks like the Barb preliminary budget discussion.
Perfect. Had to move the gallery out of the way of the presentation. So normally this comes a little later in the month, but due to council's out of town schedule, I went ahead and got this going for you guys a little earlier, give a little extra time for department heads and council. So we are required to go over estimated revenues and expenditures for 2022, and then the estimated forecast revenues and base budget with council as part of the RCW. So this is kind of our first initial, everything is base budget based on prior year with known changes for 2023. This is our preliminary budget calendar. So we're kind of moving things up a little earlier. As I mentioned, the compensation salary survey, it's not exactly part of the budget discussion. It's HR related, but we will have some budget forecasting involved. That will be done on the 20th, and then we'll work on strategic staffing and wages on the 4th, and continue forward with budget requests and your recommendations. So make sure we're here. And then, so we're looking at our revenues 2022 again, budgeted versus estimated in our 2023 base budget. There are some increases in our estimated revenue in 2022. We did have some increased taxes and also our pandemic recovery funds. Our increases partially due to the allocation of those funds from the general other fund into the general street and stormwater fund. So there are increases in those funds as well for the pandemic recovery funds, for the staffing, the contracts, and the purchases approved by council for that funding. And then additionally, there was some SRO revenue, that's the school resource officer revenue from 2021 that was received in 2022, and so that was an additional increase. As I mentioned, recovery funds, that is change from 2022 to 2023 in the general fund and the other general fund. The capital project, this is all the capital project funds that we have from park mitigation and traffic mitigation, real estate excise taxes. We have a decrease in this, and this is just due to grant reimbursements and bond proceeds from 2022. So we don't anticipate those in 2023. Anything that we don't do in 2022, we will roll forward into 2023, and that includes our revenues and our expenditures. The other proprietary that is listed up there, that's the sewer fund that we have, and there is a decrease due to debt obligations. They have a debt being paid off that we have, and then we bill them, and then they pay us for that. So it's part of our unified sewer agreement. And then equipment funds. There are some one-time contributions of the pandemic recovery funds to the technology fund for the approved technology upgrades. And so that's future upgrades and maintenance, annual continuing maintenance that will put the funds into the fund that actually pays for it. So we won't have to keep track of it in a separate fund. It'll just go into the normal expenditures. And then there's police revenue. There's a transfer of the one-time criminal justice payment that they're utilizing for the body cams. And that'll be a multi-year camera program. So we're going to put that funding into their equipment replacement fund. In the expenditures, there will be some decrease, estimated decrease in the equipment fund for police, as we mentioned, as they're unable to get the vehicles that they were intended to purchase and pay for. So, and unfortunately, there's additional costs that will come because they were unable to get the less expensive prior year vehicles. So they're going to have to add funding for that. So that will kind of come through in our 2023 budget. We'll see the increase in the costs and the change in their replacement. There will be a change in the replacement schedule since they can't get their cars now and the dollars. So they're working on that now, as Chief Pizzico had mentioned. And then, do you have any questions on these? In the sake of time, we're here late. Please let me know if you have any additional questions. We're just kind of going over really high level funding right now. This is a look at our current organizational chart. We have 123 budgeted permanent positions, plus 4 seasonals, 2 in park and 2 in public works, and then 1 temporary policy analyst position. Currently, we have 11 vacant permanent positions, and those are assumed to be filled in 2023. So for the base budget, this is where we will start with these FTEs, this number of FTEs in this position budget with the increases we anticipate in dollars for the cost of living and benefit increases. So this is kind of where it will start. And then additional FTEs will be requested through the budget process. So this is a high level look at all of our 2023 budget. This is broken down, consolidated the funds by fund type. So you have your general fund and then your other general fund. Special revenue funds includes your street fund, your drug fund, and your arts fund. The majority of that is obviously in your street fund. Debt service fund, those always have your revenues and your expenditures. The capital, as I mentioned earlier, that's all of your capital funds. Proprietary, the other proprietary is our sewer fund, which we do still have for their debt service payments. As I mentioned, we bill them, they pay us, it goes into the sewer fund and then gets paid. Additionally, we receive a fee from the sewer district from our unified sewer agreement. At this point, it is $15,000 a year just for any essentials that staff provides for the sewer district. And I think there is some proposal that we put some money aside for potential assumption once we know this is going to happen. One of the suggestions is potentially that $15,000 that we receive, we usually use it against legal bills, professional services, whatever is kind of sewer related, but maybe leave it in that fund for that potential assumption. So in that few years, we will have more than enough for some of the things that we've been talking about, the
it's not as high an expenditure as we had originally thought in the sewer. So that's one of the thoughts, is we can just leave it in that fund, not utilize it until we need it. So big picture, base revenues, we're looking at about 38 million, and then base expenditures, including capital and operating, about $33 million. Overall estimated ending is 48 million. Again, this is just your base budget. We do have some work to do on salaries, benefits, and capital projects. I like to show you your major revenue sources. As usual, our largest is sales tax and property tax. There's a slight decrease in from our 2022 budget to our 2022 estimate for sales tax, and that is actually our retail sales tax is up, but our construction sales tax is a little bit down. So that is where that small difference comes in. A couple other things that are actually potentially down, building permits. The building department is working on an analysis now. They're basically digging in deeper. You can't exactly trend building permits, zoning permits, traffic impact fees, and park impact fees. So they have to do a lot of analysis on what the known developments are coming in, when they anticipate them coming in. And so there's a lot of work being done right now in the building department. So we'll update those figures as we get them. This is a slide that our senior accountant, Roundy, used to like to show, just showing the property tax history for the city of Lake Stevens. The red line is the assessed values. Our estimated increased assessed values for this year is 41, almost 42% in Lake Stevens. We're normally somewhere around 14 or 15%. So it's a pretty big increase for this coming year's revenues. This does decrease our levy rate a lot. So that's the purple line. You can see for 2022, it is 92 cents per thousand, and next year we're looking at 68 cents per thousand. Our estimated revenue is 5.8 million. I will go into a lot more detail on the property tax, and I know I gave sort of a preview a month or so ago when we got the first analysis, and it isn't a very big jump for property tax payers for the city's portion of taxes. It's more those entities who have done levy lid lifts, the fire district, the school district, any of those that are potentially increasing people's property tax bills. It's not necessarily the cities. Ours is actually staying fairly consistent. So,
Hey Barb, can I? This is just for future. Since the county assessor raised people's values quite significantly, and with the adjustment in the real estate market, many people's homes are assessed at significantly more than what they could get on the open market. So I would anticipate with that correction that there's going to be a significant drop. There should be at least in the following year that would match, so that the assessed value is not more than what the property is actually worth. So I would expect there to be a significant decrease. I mean, just an example, there's a house just on the lake here. It's $200,000 below what the assessed value is. So it's 20% below what the asking price is. So just that's going to be hitting us. So we should be aware of that. And I'm sure you're already on that.
perfect. You will keep an eye on that. And like I said, luckily at this point with the property tax rules and laws, we only increase by that 1%, so 101% per year, and then new construction gets added in separately. So ours, as the assessed value drops, our levy rate goes up, but it really stayed fairly consistent with the actual dollar amounts that we receive. So. I always show our untapped revenues. Utility tax, we've talked about this a number of times. Currently, there's no tax imposed on the sewer utility or the stormwater utility. That's something to consider for council. 6%. There are no limitations on the percentage that you can charge on these utilities. Again, it's a tax on the utility that is able to be passed on to the payer. So at 6%, sewer is estimated over $1 million, and at 6%, stormwater is estimated about $3,000. And it could be used as, we could use it in the general fund or street fund, the sewer that one, there's a nexus with the roads, kind of like garbage service, there's a nexus with that. Utility tax there, damaging the roads when they go through, and so we could put that money into roads as well, in order to maintain those, so. Another one we normally talk about that I don't have on here is our transportation benefit district. Obviously, that one's going to ballot on, in November, so I didn't really talk about that.
Barb, does that $1 million mark for the sewer include the recent rate increase that the sewer district imposed, or is that the old $86? I include the current $99. That's roughly like a 16% increase.
I think the last estimate we did, and I did just sort of increase it a percentage, but the last one that we looked at, it was right around 8.5 or 8.50. We were saying it was going to be, so we have not pulled all of their operating statements to find out where they actually are today, and what that looks like. So it's potentially could be more.
Okay, thank you.
So looking at our general fund revenues, I just kind of went through some of those. Property tax into the general fund is about 72%, almost $2 million in property tax. The 28% goes into the street funds. As I mentioned, our levy rate estimates at that 68 cents per 1,000. I always give the $100,000 home so people can multiply it. That amount by however much their house is. If it's 700, they can multiply it by 7. But for a $100,000 home, that's about $68, and for $1 million home, it's about $680. So, sales tax, we are estimating a 6% increase. Retail sales tax, like I said, has been increasing quite a bit. This does also include the estimated Costco revenues that we anticipate beginning to receive in the first quarter of 2023. And then construction sales tax, we still do maintain $300,000 of the construction sales tax in the general fund, and then $800 goes into the contingency fund, which when we're doing forecasting, that still does play into our operating revenues and expenditures. And as mentioned, in the permit fund, the restricted fund, we have decreased the zoning and subdivision slightly for 2023. That is actually the amount that we anticipate getting in 2022. So we will update those numbers when we get those from the building department. The expenditures, we are looking at a 2.6% decrease over the 2022 budget, and that's for the one-time expenditures. And then our estimated base increase is 12.8%. The majority of that is based on the salary benefits, cost of living increases. In the past years, we have consistently done a 90% of CPI for the non-representatives. This year, the CPI is 9.5%. So it is currently in the base budget for non-reps as 8.6%. The guild and non-guild have contracts currently where it's 90% of CPI, but they have caps. So they have minimums and maximums, and that's what they're in there currently as the base. And then Teamsters, we did not put any increase on Teamsters as they are in negotiations now. And we don't really want to put in the budget a percentage and then they say that's already in the budget, so that's what we get. So we just don't really use anything at this point, and we just plan for adding additional dollars. So estimated fund balance is about 5.1 million after these. Street fund expenditure revenues, you have your property tax, multi-vehicle, motor vehicle fuel tax, which again is based on gallons sold, not dollars. And then the multimodal tax. This is going up a bit. We receive estimated state shared sales tax information from municipal research, and they do show a pretty good increase in the motor vehicle fuel tax for next year and the additional multimodal. So those are from them. The garbage utility tax, as we mentioned, that utility tax on our waste management, and that does go into streets for street maintenance. In our expenditures, continuing the annual pavement preservation budget at the 400. If we do receive the TBD funding, then that will increase by that additional 500,000. It will not be in the street fund. It will be in its own separate TBD fund, so we can track that funding separately. And then we're continuing to contribute to the equipment funds, but that needs to be reevaluated based on the replacement schedules, as Council President Ewing had mentioned. We need to work on the replacement schedules and dollar amounts. And then there will be some costs that we don't really have built in for the APWA certification. As was asked earlier, do they need additional things for that certification? And I've seen some of the staffing, strategic staffing plans, and it doesn't look like there's too many additional staff positions until we get through this certification process, but those will be presented to council coming soon.
Hey, Barb, is there any discussion among your associations about the potential of fuel tax revenues going down over the next few years with the mandates of electric vehicles and state facilities and all of that?
No, not at this point. There's, I think it's the assumption that there will be something replacing it for the electric vehicles. There'll be something replacing that fuel tax, but there hasn't been a lot about it yet.
We want to keep a watchful eye on that because that'll have a significant impact.
Make sure that stays on the radar. And then stormwater, our stormwater service charges, we estimate a 4% increase. That's generally a 1% increase in just the number of utility payers, so number of homes, and then there's a 3% increase built in based on our rate study that was done a few years ago. And then there's also contributions from the permit managerial fund for permit related work. So every month we take whatever the stormwater, street, other departments have worked on permits, and then there's restricted permit fund moved into those funds to pay for those activities. And then expenditures, we're looking at operating base budget. Again, we haven't built in a cost of living on this. I will start working with Director Warrington sort of on the side to kind of keep an eye on how much that is going to affect these funds until they get the negotiations completed. Continue with lake treatments, and then right now there's no capital budgeted into our surface water capital fund. Every one of the projects that's going on right now, we have estimated or assumed that it will be completed this year, and then anything that does not will roll it into next year's budget as a budget amendment. And I know the new city engineer is working with her team, the project manager and her team, on capital CIP right now, so we can come forward with the capital expenditure budget recommendations to council soon. And then our debt expenditures, there is a separate stormwater debt fund, and that pays for the Vector and then the decant purchase. I did add in our base budget forecasted ending balances. So for the general fund, I actually went back to 2021 on this one. Normally I go forward, but I included the 2021 budget, the 2022 budget, and the 2022 estimated to show the change in the ending fund balance trajectory. And that was due to the pandemic recovery funds. And so based on the things that we're doing and the items that we had budgeted, the trajectory was significantly downward towards a zero balance much earlier than it is now. This does still include budgeted for spending all of the pandemic recovery funds, but it moved out the expenditures enough to actually make the current ending fund balance in 2029 well above the 10% line that we always talk about, that we want to make sure we stay above. So here we have the street and the stormwater funds. Again, neither of these include the future capital project expenditures, as we don't have those in there. So these will change. Obviously, they look fantastic right now, but they will change a little. Hopefully they'll still look great. But and then our 2023 budget priorities, we did add maintaining public health and safety, as Councilmember Fredericks had mentioned during the last meeting. We are looking forward to digging into what that means for us as a staff and how we can do this. I know speaking with Director Wright, we're talking about parks, not just the police department, and it's more the health, wellness, and safety of the community. So we have added that in there. And then just looking at our next steps. So the next budget discussion, as I mentioned, this is a little, the first thing we're going to do is on September 20th is discuss the compensation salary survey. And then the next meeting on October 4th, we'll go over the strategic staffing plans, discuss the cost of living, the CBIWs. Director Warrington has been meeting with a number of other HR directors and departments throughout Snohomish County to determine where we are in comparison. What are their plans to do with this? How is that going to affect us if we do something different? If they do the full cost of living adjustment, we don't, how far behind are we going to get? What does this actually mean? So there's going to be quite a bit of that discussion going on behind the scenes, and then we'll bring forward information on the 4th. And then we did want to review those FTE trading scenarios for council's approval, and we'll go over those during that discussion. So once we get into the salary stuff. And then October meetings, obviously we'll go over all the requests and capital projects and mayor recommendations.
If I may interject, what about the senior center? Where would we jump in and try and make that happen?
You can discuss it at any time. I mean, this is something I think Council President Ewing had mentioned. I think another council member had asked a question about how would we make recommendations for the budget, and I believe you had said bring them to the president, discuss them.
Okay.
They can go to the mayor, but I would like to say the senior center did receive their check this year. I hand delivered it and it was cashed in April for the
How much?
$30,000.
Okay, that's
So-
not what I was told.
Yeah.
But
I double checked today that it was cashed in April.
well, good.
So if you could, if it's not too much of a hassle, if we could get emailed, because if we're being asked and told that we're not getting it, maybe we could forward that email to those that are asking us why we haven't paid them. That would be helpful.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, Councilmember Dickinson had sent me an email and I had responded, and Jean had sent that to the rest of the council. I don't think it was clear that they had received the funding. It just said that it was $30,000 for 2022, but I will definitely send another email.
Right.
Giving the date that I hand delivered it to them.
Right. I
Showing that
appreciate
they
doing
actually
that
did
part.
cash that check.
It's just, this is an ongoing thing every time I go to the senior board meetings. And I
Yeah.
just, it makes me really feel awful.
Yeah.
So I want to do right by our seniors, so.
And Mary,
Absolutely. Us too.
thank you for bringing that up. I too share your concern for the seniors. So one thing that's helpful, like we seem at the food bank to have data with which to work to help us understand the needs, what they're doing to raise funds, what we're contributing, what other people are contributing, and what those needs are. I know I've talked to city administrator, to the mayor about, kind of some long-term ideas. I've talked to Jerry, myself, and
Right.
so
I
I believe there's a lot of support from all interested parties to help make that happen. There needs to be a similar synergy that we have with the food bank and similar community support. I'll just say I wouldn't expect to have an Edmonds type senior center unless some of our people in the city are willing to contribute 7-figure checks. Many people contribute 7-figure checks because there are,
Right.
I think, over $10 million of that was donated from private citizens.
Yeah. Yes. I hear you. And I will go back with that. Thank you. They are trying to make the senior center run more like a business so that they can make more money. I mean, they get that piece of it. That would be helpful. But yeah, let's just do right somehow, some way.
And I just will reiterate, I said from talking to the city administrator and the mayor, I'm very confident there's a high level of support there, and I sense a high level of support from the council, so and the community. So I think we can work together to have a good outcome.
All right, good.
Remember the food bank, I've been here 17 years and it's been discussed for 17 years. and
Yes,
We're now going vertical, so.
Yeah.
Councilmember Dickinson, if you ever have them asking and questioning, just have them call me, have them reach
I
out
will.
to me, and
I sure will.
happily walk through and
I
do
sure
any
will.
research they need for me.
I sure will. Thank you.
Anything else? Questions right now?
Thank you for the information.
Barb, if you can, I know this is part of the budget, all the financial stuff with regard to lodging tax that didn't get sent out that was used as part of the short-term rental, if you could send that out to the council, the same information you sent the subcommittee, if that wasn't already sent out, if you could please resend that. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Barb, for that excellent presentation. Russ, update on the Everett water line.
Sure. So for the sake of brevity, I'll go through things pretty quickly tonight. Please stop me if you have any specific questions. So one of the council had asked as one of their priorities to get an update on the Everett water line. So what I can report is the two city staff have continued to work together. We've been working on this actually for several years. One of the focuses changed for us when we were doing the 91st extension project down to 24th. So that became the priority. We executed the interlocal agreement there and the funding agreement to build the new water line and do those improvements. What got put on the back burner was some of the economic development issues that we've been dealing with. But within the last couple of months, we have had some really fruitful discussions with the city of Everett, where they are willing to allow parking now on the northern 30 feet of their easement. What that means in a practical sense is that would allow one bank of parking stalls and half of a drive aisle. So that's actually a pretty big concession and would free up a considerable amount of property on the front part of those properties adjacent to 20th for commercial development. So that actually is really a big improvement over our past discussions.
Russ, you said 30 feet. Is there a 5-foot building setback within the pavement area?
Yeah, so actually, let me correct myself, 35 feet, and then they are recommending a 5-foot setback from that, which would be sort of a buffer for equipment. So that is one of the things they would like. Originally, they had asked for a 15-foot setback. And in terms of a setback to the water line, it's really not going to be that. In most cases, it probably wouldn't be a big concern. I believe people would use that for the parking, which, as I mentioned, would include the parking stalls plus the drive aisle. So it's unlikely that there would be a structure built up to that easement in any condition. I wouldn't anticipate it, but yes, they are asking for a limited setback also from the edge of the easement.
What is it, 30 or 35 feet?
35 feet plus a 5-foot setback.
All right, thank you.
And so then Everett would reserve the right to use those properties during emergencies. They would try to give as much notice as possible. And if they had to do upgrades, they would give at least 6 months notice. They've proposed to allow a non-motorized east-west trail through the corridor. We've just talked about some of the setbacks, 5 foot on the north side, 10 foot on the south side. And that's where they have the majority of their infrastructure. One of the things that the city had really pushed and that had been ambiguous in prior versions was that Lake Stevens was in fact the permitting authority. And they have conceded that, yes, we are the permitting authority for land use permits, SEPA, et cetera, and also for code enforcement. Everett would continue to allow major crossings for roads, et cetera, and that we could jointly come up with a communication strategy for affected property owners and come up with some joint standards for what those water line crossings look like for road sections, parking sections, et cetera. So at this point, I think there's been a lot of movement. Some of the next steps would be for us to go back and put those into a revised interlocal agreement that would go before the two cities councils for consideration and then leading to execution by staff. We have to come up with those mutually agreeable engineering standards. And then the next sort of issue that has come up during our discussions, as we've looked at the economic development along 20th Street, there are several of the residential properties that are still tied to Everett's water line. When they go to convert to a commercial use, they have to go off of the Everett water line due to some concerns, both practical and code-wise for the city of Everett. So we're kind of working on another strategy that would become a three-way partnership between the cities of Everett, Lake Stevens, and Snohomish PUD to design and construct a redundant water line. There would be actually several benefits to that. The current property owners, as I mentioned, tie directly into the water mains. So there are some significant engineering challenges for backflow into that system potentially, as well as you're going into a pressurized system, and all of those systems to the commercials would need to be upgraded for fire flow, et cetera. So there are practical reasons to take them off of the main and put them on PUD water. And so that is really going to be another thing that we're going to be working on with, again, the two cities and the utility amongst a couple of departments to figure out what some solutions would look like. And staff would probably come back to the city council with some sort of budget sharing request to either do a part of the design or the construction of that redundant water line to, again, entice commercial development along 20th Street. So that is my basic report tonight. Again, a lot of concessions from the city of Everett that I think would move our interlocal agreement forward. And then a new challenge of figuring out how do we get water service then to these other properties. Any questions or comments from the council tonight?
Congratulations on getting some concessions.
Right. Thrilled. Yeah. Let's get the ILA done before they change their minds.
Yeah, so what is the timeline on the ILA process? What is a reasonable timeline, do you think, for that ILA?
I think drafting the ILA can go really quickly for these nuts and bolts things that we've talked about. So I would say maybe 60 days, 60 to 90 days going between the two councils. I don't know what Everett's work plan is going to look like. As far as the three-way partnership, I think that could take significantly longer with different hearing bodies to figure out that path forward, but I would take the two items separately.
So we could have it would be a reasonable assumption we could have an ILA signed by the end of the year.
Yes.
Great.
So Russell, whatever we can do to, if there's something from the council that we need, we will put that on the agenda as soon as
Let's
that
take
is available. So that's a really important step. I know I've talked to a number of developers that are anxious to work in that area, and I'm sure you have too.
I have a quick question for you. If you're going to be putting the PUD water line along the south side of 20th, along the northern edge of the water line easement, isn't that within the area that we just agreed that we could pave?
Yes. So the water line would be underneath the paved area. That would be part of a consideration.
Who gets to pay for it?
Well, that becomes the question. Initial conversations, Everett didn't say no to cost sharing. They didn't say yes, but obviously that's a council decision for them to make. The city, through use of the pandemic recovery funds, could contribute some of those funds for utilities and do some of the construction. And so again, it looks like it would be a three-way partnership. PUD would have interest in contributing some resources as well, maybe waiving fees or something like that for hookups for their new clients if this new water line. So again, those are some discussion points that really need to get hammered out. What is the cost and who's going to pay for it? But for a practical sense, someone is going to have to step up first and agree, I'm going to do the design, or I'm going to fund the design. And so we can really understand, what the magnitude of this cost is. So.
Thank you.
All right, anything else for us?
No, thank you.
Excellent. Just on behalf of the council and the community, thank you for that. That's going to be a huge boon once we get that dialed in. All right, so we will move on to executive session.
Who should remain here?
Can you stay?
Yeah.
Hold on real quick. How long? do you
10
guys-
minutes.
10 minutes and no action?
Chief, are you gonna come back afterwards? Or are you leaving?
Yeah, there is possible action.
Is the council going to take a quick break right now and then,
I think Dorsey, I just went to the bathroom.
okay, and Sean's stepping out from it, all right. Okay.
You did. That's a good
Are we offline?
No, we're on. I need to announce what we're doing.
Okay.
Everybody left.
I know. Let's take a 5-minute recess and we'll be back at 8:49. No, there's no need for teams. There's nobody out.
Gene, you're right.
Yeah.
Public health approved.
Yeah,
I
so
just saw
we are
this
back.
email.
We're
I
back on.
apologize. I did not see this email.
Tentative.
I'm like, oh my goodness, here's
Okay,
everything.
we are back live. And there's no need to go to your Teams link since we're all here and Greg's with us, so that's good. Council is going to recess to executive session to discuss property acquisition and potential litigation per RCW 4230-1101C and 4230-1101I for approximately 15 minutes, potential action afterwards. Okay, we're back on.
All right, we've adjourned from executive session, and there is action to follow. Well, potential action is our motion.
I move to authorize the mayor to sign the indemnity agreement between the city and Chicago Title Company to clear as a special exception to Title 1984 deed of trust, in which Hobday and Markin Development Corporation is the named beneficiary and for which the underlying debt has been satisfied.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Any opposed?